Here's a belief creators struggle with. If I change how I create, I'll lose what makes my work authentic. Let's think that through. Welcome to another walk in the woods with Brandy and I. So, handling that issue and that belief is something I've had to grow through, because for me, I have an artistic kind of personality, and so I like to create. I like my own tastes. There's a certain ego that comes with that, and there can be some narcissistic leaning traits for an artistic personality type. You know, not necessarily in the destructive and self-consuming and like hurtful toward others kind of way, but it can look more like, I want to keep doing this thing this way because it's my way, and I don't want anybody to tell me that I shouldn't be doing it that way. I don't want anyone to suggest changes that I can make. That's something I've had to learn to grow out of personally. I'm still working on it. One of the things that can make a difference is the way that if you use AI as an assistant, if you use LLMs, whether that's Claude or Gemini or ChatGPT, you set the tone for how that conversation goes. You decide, you tell your LLM assistants how you want them to interact with you. And if you want them to just validate you and stroke your ego and give you confirmation bias reasons for why you should keep on doing what you're already doing, well, they'll do that. Gladly, they'll gladly do that. But if you want to grow, and if you want to actually get better, and you want your content to strike a chord more, if you want to get answers that are outside of, you know, just an echo chamber of yes men and like a captive audience that has to like whatever you're doing, then you've got to tell it, I want pushback. You know, don't give me the version that of reaction of response to what I say that only is pumping me up. Give me, oh, got an alarm going off here. Give me the real counter logic and counter arguments to what I'm saying here. And tell me what I'm missing. Tell me what I'm not seeing. Tell me both why this would land with my audience and why this wouldn't land with my audience. And of course, that's for creators here, but to generalize that out to others, you could say the same kind of thing with if you're trying to figure out contracts, how to make deals. If you're trying to figure out relationships, it's really for the best, and it helps balance out your ego if you can take constructive criticism, if you can take deconstruction of your methods and the way you're doing things. So I've used LLMs to condition myself more to accept corrections, revisions, to see things as a process. Another thing that's helped me, and what helped me in the past, and it's something I'm doing again now, for a while I was trying to learn code, and I was using an interactive development environment, which was for kind of like RPGs and, you know, sort of old PC style games, you know, from like 90s, early 2000s, kind of stuff you'd find on the internet everywhere back at the time. And while I never actually got the game off the ground, the project never actually really moved beyond. Funny, Beyond was actually the name of the engine, was the name of the development environment. But anyway, what I learned in that time, and I've been relearning as I've been starting to do some coding again, but now using AI, which is way better. But I learned that there's iterations. You do multiple iterations. You don't just take that first thing that you did, sort of the first stroke of the brush, the first keys that you input, and say, oh, there it is, there's my finished program. You run tests. You go through and you see, how does that code run? What happens when I use it? And you look for bugs. You look for the flaws on purpose. You look for, okay, so I got this code off the ground, but is it even a fun game? Does anybody even want to play this? Is this something that's actually just an idea in my head? I'm so in love with the idea and the concept that I'm missing the gap that's here between that and the reality of what it's like to actually interact with it. And by putting yourself through that kind of thinking, and which is what I've been doing, you have to navigate. This is something kind of I learned from Jordan Peterson, was you negotiate your identity with the rest of the world and the people that are close to you. We don't just get to say, this is who I am and that's how it is. When you enter into relationships and you develop real commitment and real, when there's real trust, when there's real commitment and intimacy, when people begin to develop their picture of who you are, and you establish norms and you establish ways of doing things, when you hit that point, there's agreements. There's ways, whether they're spoken or unspoken, that people are used to seeing you and how you're going to act and what you're going to do. And the roles that you have in the relationship. And so likewise with an audience, or with somebody that you're working for, or an organization that you're involved with, you are negotiating that identity. You're negotiating what your behavior is within that construct of that relationship. So, all that to say, when I'm working on these things, what I'm thinking about, for me as a YouTube creator, I'm thinking about thumbnails and titles and descriptions. I can't just be like, but this is how I like to do it. I like my thumbnails to look that way. I created this and it's me and I like it. Being told, yeah, but here's what it's missing, or here's what could be done better, and that would really sell the core idea of what you're doing better, would give people a better understanding of what it is, and it'll be a better presentation of what it really is that you have to offer. There's a bit of an ego death. There's a bit of a, okay, I have to let go of this thing that I'm fond of about how I'm doing this thing, so that I can actually get better, so that I can actually improve. I can have something more than what is currently there. And that's a challenge. And I think that's something that stands in the way of all artistic types and personalities. My wife about smacked me with a branch as she pulled out of the way. It's always fun around here. So the issue is facing that. I would say that thought that I will lose my authenticity, like my work will stop being what it was meant to be if I stop doing things the same way, if I start doing it a different way. I think the answer and what I'm having to come to myself is do you want to just make this for you? Or do you really want to incorporate other people? Are you doing this just because it makes you feel good all by yourself in your own cave? Or are you doing this to build a community, to be of service, to make a change in the lives of others, to find something greater in community, and in developing something that can really be shared and that can really bring in the insights and ideas and interactions of others and the personalities of others, as opposed to just what you can produce on your own and what you can just, enjoy all by yourself. And at a certain point, it's like, how long can you stand? Even if it's like, well, I do just want to do this for me. Okay, but how long is that really even interesting? How long will that really last? Will that really work for you? Because at a certain point, you want and need other people's participation. You want and need it to be a conversation, to be interesting. Same reason why we need others in our life, period. Same reason why we need to get married. It's not good for man to be alone. We need the other. We need, as a man, we need the feminine influence. We need the collaborative, the not necessarily opposite in like a negative way, but the complementary other side, because it makes life interesting, because it brings out the best in you. It makes you, for one thing, as a contrast, realize who you really are and what you're really supposed to do. But also it brings out things in you that you don't even realize and you don't even see in yourself. And it provides balance. And so likewise, as a creator, as any kind of producer of things and of services that are to be seen, that are to be experienced by the world outside of ourselves, we have to acknowledge that growth doesn't happen when we're just doing the same thing and never changing it. It doesn't come from comfort of getting to hold on to our familiar patterns. It comes from challenge. It comes from the willingness to have a creative dialectic, to let what we're saying, what we're producing, what we're doing, to go to the chopping block and be butchered and be deconstructed and go through a living autopsy, so that we see what works, what doesn't work, what's at the core of it, what's essential to it, what is and the reality isn't that you lose authenticity. The reality is, I would argue, that you gain authenticity. You get deeper, you get more distilled, you get to the core of what that essence really is. And what gets developed in the process is something more sophisticated, is more refined. And just because other sources are influencing that and changing that, whether it's the LLMs that you're working with, that you've coached to be a little bit more of a hardball coach with you, to be a little bit more contrarian, or it's people that you invite, that you allow in your relationship. You set up the expectations in such a way, you set up the protocol, the behavior, the way that things are, where they know that you're looking for more than just approval, more than just, applause and a slap on the back and everything you do is wonderful. If you're really wanting genuine insight, if you're wanting help because you see the value in what they have to offer and what they have to give, and honestly, that actually just adds value to the relationship too. And that empowers them, because they realize they're not just there to stroke your ego. They're not just there to make you feel good. You genuinely appreciate their insights. You genuinely appreciate the value that they can offer, their wisdom. And that's just that's necessary. That's the only way you can really build a team. That's the only way that you can have real relationships, is people being allowed to disagree, people being allowed to point out things and see your flaws and your blind spots and stuff that you're missing. And sometimes You're not going to agree with them, and they won't be right. And that's fine. And you still need to validate that you're glad that they tell you what they really think. And you're glad to have their input. Because if nothing else, even when they're giving you pushback and saying something that you don't agree with, it provides clarity, it provides contrast, because you are forced to clarify, you're forced to define for yourself why you're not going to take that suggestion specifically, what you have found of a solid anchor, something of substance, something of your values, what is authentic to you, and you're not going to change it. But you have to be very economical, very conservative about that. You can't have too many things that are seen as totally that's not the right word. You can't have too many things that you just can't sacrifice. And that includes aesthetics to a certain extent. Aesthetics matter. And what is on the surface, it needs to tell the story about what's underneath. It needs to invite. It needs to be something that both attracts and also implies, and it implies something deeper, and there is more to be read for those that wish to read it. You want something that calls to someone on the skin deep level, but then at the same time that there's mystery, there's depth, and there's more that's under that for them to find. So the aesthetics matter, and they need to reflect the spirit of what is underneath. If they don't, then it's either a mismatch and it's just not quite right and there's a disconnect there, or even worse, it's lying. It's presenting one thing or set of things as the essence, as what is elemental to it all, the core of what you're doing, when you're actually doing something else, and when the story you're telling is actually something else altogether. So the aesthetics do matter, and it is important to let go of what we think the correct aesthetics are if we're wrong, and if it's not actually presenting the true story, if it's not actually inviting people into the essence and what's really authentic about what we're doing and what we have to do. So anyway, that's something I've been thinking through. I'm still thinking through. I'm in the process right now of putting that to work on this channel and with other things that I'm doing. So if this subject is of interest to you, if this is something you'd like to get into further, then please feel free to comment, and also DM me on any of my social media platforms if you want to go further into this topic, or anything else that you have questions about, anything else you'd like to have a conversation, have a dialogue about. I'd be very interested to hear what you have to say. Across all my platforms, it's always at Ask Sean Douglas. So thanks for joining us on this walk today. Peace out.